Hi everybody, it's me Gemma and I am coming to you with my end of March wrap up. Now I did do a wrap up that covered February and the first part of March, which I will link in the cards, but this is covering from then until today, which is the 1st of April. So since my last update I have read 13 books, which I think is, you know, pretty good going. Not as many as I would have liked to, but what can you do? If there is crunching in the background, I have had to bribe my dogs with pig's ears to not run around like mental people while I'm filming. So I'm going to start off with the physical books that I read in March. So I wanted to start off with the Ash Princess trilogy by Laura Sebastian, and that consists of Ash Princess, Lady Smoke and Ember Queen. Now I gave all these books 4 out of 5 stars. I really thoroughly enjoyed them. They're about a girl called Theodosia, who she is the princess of a conquered kingdom. Her mother was killed in the initial sort of invasion, and she has had to spend her whole life as a captive of this really cruel court, and they give her the sort of derogatory nickname of the Ash Princess because her mum was the Fire Queen. So the 3 books cover Theodosia sort of fighting to take back her name, take back her throne and help her people who have been enslaved. And I really enjoyed all 3 of these, and I thought what really set them apart for me was the fact that even though there is romance in the books, it never stops Theodosia from making the choices that are best for her country, for Astria. She is the queen first and a woman second, and even in these books the queen does not marry, and there's a whole subplot at one point where she may have to marry, and it's really against everything that she stands for. Even though there is someone that she loves, she's still not going to marry him because queens in Astria don't marry. And I really thought it was a good antidote for some of the sort of YA, not just YA, adult fiction too, stories where there's someone who has a really important task to complete, but they're constantly distracted by a love interest or by a romance, and the romance gets in the way of what they have to do, and you're kind of thinking, I wouldn't want this person to be in charge of saving my life because they're so distracted by a boy or a girl or whatever. But that's not a problem for Theodosia in these books. As I say, she's very smart, and that is one of the things I liked most about these books in particular. I do recommend them, and I think they're quite a good binge because they're staying in series, and it is in fact finished. And then also in March I read Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is one that has been very popular on BookTube, at least since I've been on BookTube, which is like nearly a year, and I can see for what reason. I did give it 5 stars. It is told in a mixed media, sort of multimedia format of reports and descriptions of sort of camera footage and emails and things like that. And it's about a boy called Ezra and a girl called Katie, and they are survivors of an attack on their colony, and the whole book follows sort of the aftermath of the attack on their colony and them sort of fleeing from another ship that's chasing them. So I do have, what's the second book called? Gemini. I've got Gemini in my pile to read. I don't know if I'll get to it this month because I'm doing the Owls, and my books for the Owls are going to take precedent, but I certainly will be continuing the rest of the series, even though I have heard from people that the other 2 books don't quite match up to Illuminae. And this one is linked in with my sort of fascination with burials and death and other morbid stuff. I recommend you check out the website for the Order of the Good Death if you're interested in any of that. I know some of you have read Caitlin Dottie's books and enjoyed them. She has the YouTube channel Ask a Mortician, and I just picked this up because someone I sort of followed on Instagram was featured in here. So it basically shows like collections of weird and morbid things like medical skeletons, shrunken heads, animal bones, vintage coffins, gas masks, even like stuff like this, like vintage Ouija board collections, which I just found it really interesting, and I find the people that do the collecting interesting. It kind of reminded me of, if you've been watching The Tiger King on Netflix, the obsessional quality of some of these collectors. The picture plates are great in it, and there's certainly some collections I'd like to see up close, and it does a good job of explaining how and why these people collect. Certainly I think there are ethical issues with some of these collections. My degree's in anthropology, so we did cover quite a bit of ethics to do with museum collections in my course, and while I was at Aberdeen Uni, some human remains were repatriated to, I believe it was Canada, First Nations in Canada, and we got to go along to the ceremony that did the repatriation, and it was so interesting. And I really do think that, I don't know if I agree about people having human remains in private collections, and maybe that's just me, but I certainly wouldn't want to own human remains. And I don't know whether that's just a sort of, I mean, I like to look at them, I like to learn about them. That sounds morbid anyway, but I think that if human remains are going to be owned by anyone, it should be in museum collections for scientific use or for cultural study. And if the culture that the remains belong to wants them back, then they should be given back. I don't believe in holding on to remains or artifacts that have significance to cultures that are still ongoing. So yeah, I think this is a good book, and I think it is a good book about collections and about morbid things, but certainly, like I say, I don't necessarily agree with all the collecting that goes on, and I certainly don't agree with the private collection of human remains. Yeah, that's just my two cents on that, but I certainly wouldn't want my skeleton or my head or anything to end up in a private collection. I don't know if I'd mind so much if it was in a museum, because then at least you're doing some good, you're educating people, but I don't see what good the human remains in these collections are doing. They're not really educating anyone sitting in somebody's basement, you know. So yeah, I read that, it was good, but that's my ramble on human remain collection. And I also participated in the Book Junkie Trials Royal Weekender, and for that I read Gods of Jade and Shadow and Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. Now, I am in the team Magi, and I will be participating again when it comes around later on in the year. I think it's a really good readathon. It's very well organised, it's a very big readathon, and it's a good way of getting to know other people in the book community you might not otherwise come across. You might never come across their channel. So I really enjoy taking part. And so, as I say, the first book I read was, this had to have purple on the cover, so I picked Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars, and I was crying for the whole last chapter. Like, I got to the end and my eyes were welling up. Oh my god. It's about a girl called Cassiopeia who she lives with her family, but she's an outcast within her family. And Moreno Garcia really does do a good job of sort of, I wouldn't say she subtly hints at why she's an outcast. She pretty much comes right out and says it, that her mum had left and married an indigenous man, hence the surname Toon, I believe, and that Cassiopeia has darker hair, darker skin, darker eyes than the rest of her family, who prize European looking features. So she is basically treated as a servant. She takes care of her grandfather until one day, when she's left behind in the house as a punishment, she decides to open a chest at the bottom of his bed that she has been forbidden to open, that everyone is forbidden to open. And when she does, she resurrects a god of death, a god of the underworld, Hunkame, and she and Hunkame go on a quest to retrieve something that belongs to him and basically get him his kingdom back of the underworld. And the whole time they have to they've got a time crunch because he is draining her life force and she is turning him more human as time goes on. So that is the sort of time crunch on that. I really loved this book. As I say, I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed having the non-European mythology as the sort of overarching, you know, story of it. You know, it was interesting to see though, like, some things can be kind of universal. You know, like they were talking about like the hero twins from the Popol Vuh, and when they were talking about Death and the Maiden and things like that, some things do seem to cross cultural boundaries. You know, and you wonder, you know, how that comes across. Is it people meeting each other, or you know what? But it was interesting. It's really well written. I thoroughly recommend purchasing it. I did see the author on Twitter, and she was quite upset because this book was up for download as a pirated download. And since I'm giving my 2 cents on other things in this video, I might as well talk about book piracy. I don't agree with it. I know what it's like to not have a lot of money, to not be able to buy a lot of books, and I understand that. But authors need to get paid for the writing that they do, or they won't be able to spend their time writing. They'll need to go and get a different job in order to pay their bills. I also saw Shauna Maguire on Twitter talking about how at the moment she's basically the breadwinner in her house, and how can she support her family if people are, you know, constantly ripping off her books and not buying them. You know, it's one of those ones again where I would like if everything was free, but I think we have to remember authors are not Disney, authors are not Marvel, they're not multi-millionaires, the majority of them. Maybe like James Patterson and J.K. Rowling are, but the majority of them aren't making that much money. And if we want to keep reading amazing books like this with diverse characters, diverse settings, you know, really cool storylines, we need to be paying authors for their work. And I would hope we would all agree on that. And then I read Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. I also gave this 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I bought this, I think it was one of the very first books I bought when I joined BookTube. So I've had it for nearly a year. I bought it because Sam at Thoughts on Tomes said she really loved it, and we have very similar tastes, so I picked it up. And the book follows a pair of friends called Sophia and Iseult, and they are both witches, and in this world there are different kinds of witches. So Safi is a truth witch, she can tell the truth from a lie, and Iseult is a thread witch, which means she can see the threads that bind people, she can see how they're feeling, things like that. And the action in the book kicks off when Safi is sort of taken to a ball. She's a noble woman, but she doesn't really want to be a noble woman, and she is kidnapped from there, and the story goes. So it's really interesting. I would say it's not high fantasy, but it's not like low fantasy either. There is pretty good world building, but I think there will be more as the series goes on. So I have already picked up Truth Witch and ordered Blood Witch because that's just how I am. And I'm really looking forward to reading them once I have finished off my prompts for owls, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll be able to fit it in to my an owl prompt, but we'll see what happens there. Now, to move on to the books that I read on my Kindle, there were some gems and there were some absolute, stinkers. So the first absolute stinker was The Abuse of Ashley Collins by John Ethan. I've been reading quite a bit more horror over the last couple of months, mainly kind of like folk horror. I really enjoy that. And this was on Kindle Unlimited. It came up as one of my recommended books, so I decided to give it a go. I wish I had not. It was awful. It was basically a normal suburban family. The daughter keeps fighting with her parents, and the parents decide to lock her in the basement and abuse her. It's really graphic, it's really gross. I just would not recommend it at all. And I am used to like sick stuff in books, I really am. But this was like, I don't know. It felt to me kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen like Hostel, where it's like gore porn. It's just disgusting. Don't read it, just don't. Take my pain and don't. And I also read Into the Wolves Den by John Nathan, and I had sort of hoped that the first one was a fluke, you know, but this one wasn't, and it's called Into the Wolves Den, and it's basically about a policeman whose daughters are kidnapped by this gang that produce like abuse and snuff films. Again, overly graphic, not well written, just stay away from it. I gave it 1 star, I gave both of them 1 star. I also read this month Kin by Keelan Patrick Burke, and this one is kind of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of feel. It was pretty good. It was basically a slasher book. I quite enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. Was it high literature? No. Was it entertaining? Yeah. And it didn't go into over detail, unlike the 2 by Jonathan Nathan, which I just felt were like, you know, abuse in the book for titillation's sake, which I didn't like. What else did I read on Kindle? I read Under a Watchful Eye by Adam Neville. Adam Neville has become probably my favourite horror author. He mainly writes, I apologise if the light keeps changing by the way, it's a strange day here in Scotland. He mainly writes like folk horror, which is one of my favourite things. And this one basically, let me have a drink and then I'll describe it. So this one is about, Under a Watchful Eye is about a horror author, and when he was in uni he had this really terrible flatmate, and I think we've all had a really dirty flatmate that we just like wanted to eject maybe, but this is like way more extreme. And the flatmate has these ties to a sort of occult group, and by turning up at the author's house he gets him involved in this occult group, and it's all very horror and scary. I gave it 4 stars, and if you like horror I would recommend it. I also, by Adam Neville, this month read Banquet for the Damned, which is set in Dundee, and it's about a couple of guys who have a band, and one of them really admires this author who wrote like a sort of Aleister Crowley type book back in the 70s, and the author has become this recluse, but he is in contact with the guy in the band, and he says, look, come to Dundee and be my research assistant. And there's a whole story with witches, and are they vampires? We don't know. It's really good. It was, I think, Adam Neville's first novel. Again, I gave this one 4 stars. I just like his books, and if you like Stephen King, you'll probably like Adam Neville, but he is better at sticking the ending than Stephen King, I would say. And last of all, I read Phil is Fair by Hannah Capin, and this one is like a modern story influenced by Macbeth. Like, I don't know why the title didn't click with me immediately, but it's about a girl who is attacked by 4 boys at a frat party, and then they go on to get revenge. Found the prose at times to be a bit over the top, but you know, I liked it. So that's everything I read this month. I have got my Owls so that was Leah, no, on the tripod. Got my Owls TBR up on my channel already. I will probably check in. I've got a couple other videos that I want to film. So I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.